Yishai, I come from Rome. I am originally from Rome. So sometimes I say, okay, so I go with my Latin books and I go to claim the rest of the Mediterranean. So I have to give up some of the argument if I want to be with the rest of the humanity.
Nobody else had a capital in Jerusalem. We had two commonwealths here. It's our land. It always has been our land. It's not the Crusaders and it's not the Byzantines. And it's certainly not the absolutely created mythology of a Palestine, which never existed, has zero history in this land. The majority of the Arabs that are here in this land came because of Zionism, because Israel brought jobs and economic opportunity. The majority of Palestinians are economic migrants to this area. And certainly the conquest of Islam into Africa, into the Middle East, and into the Levant should not be seen as that they have asserted rights. They are a conquering empire, and now they've been pushed back a little bit. What's wrong with that?
Today, we're honored to hear from Yishai Fleischer, the international spokesperson for the Jewish community of Hebron. Although Israeli settlers are mentioned in public media frequently, we do not get many opportunities to actually hear from them anything more than brief phrases taken out of context and invariably framed in a negative light. I am not sure why people do not want the voices of Israeli settlers to be heard. Whatever the case may be, we have a special opportunity today to hear a rare perspective, but one that is crucial for understanding the conflict over the land of Israel. Yishai, the floor is yours.
Howdy, everybody, and thank you, Gabriel, for having me on today. You guys caught me at a very busy time. There's a lot going on right now in Israel, and a lot going on in my personal life. But I'll sketch out a little bit about who I am, just to give you a sense of where I came from. And I was born in Haifa, Israel, the very day that the Entebbe plane was taken hostage. My parents were, you said the word dissident before, my parents were Soviet Union dissidents, and were some of the first people who got out of the Soviet Union in 1972. So they were really the early folks of the Free Soviet Jewry movement. I lived here in Haifa, actually in a mixed Jewish and Arab town. Haifa is that, but where we lived was specifically that. And I really grew up with Arabs as a young man and as a boy. And the truth is, it put an indelible sense of Arabs in the Middle East in general. It wasn't just a kind of Western lifestyle, but it was actually a very Middle Eastern lifestyle, and much more than you can imagine, because my nanny and her house was Arab, and so I grew up in that milieu, and that has given me something that I sense a lot of times is missing in a lot of the discourse in the Middle East, which is a good sense of the regional way of thinking, of regional culture. When I was 8, we moved to America. I lived in America till I was 17 in New Jersey. And then I decided that I would go back to Israel, as I always wanted to. And I went back to the army, and I went to yeshiva as well, a very good yeshiva called Ma'ale Adumim, Birkat Moshe Ma'ale Adumim. It's a great Hezra yeshiva. And I was in the paratroopers. I was injured in Lebanon. Hezbollah almost took me out with a roadside bomb in 1996. And I fought my way back to get back into the army, because my injury was serious and it took time to get healthy. And I was lucky that I was able to get back to the fighting unit. And then afterwards, my father came and he said to me, listen, you haven't been at home for 4 years. Why don't you come back and study in America? And I went to Yeshiva University and then Cardozo Law School. At Cardozo, I met a girl, and we were both Zionists, but she was an American Zionist, i.e. she was pro-Israel. Later, she actually helped me understand the distinction between pro-Israel and Zionist. Pro-Israel is when you support Israel, and Zionist is when you want to build Israel and you want to be part of the actual building process of it. In any case, we were politically active already. I was already politically active from college. And at the law school, certainly, we protested when Bill Clinton came to town to receive a prize at the law school. And our protest, he said, well, those folks outside there, they're Republicans. They're against my policies. We weren't there because we were Republicans. We were not. We were there because we were against the two-state solution and the handshake with Yasser Arafat on the White House lawn. And we protested him. Then we protested Desmond Tutu. And when he came to town, and he's, of course, the great, together with Jimmy Carter, is the great articulator of the concept that Israel's an apartheid state. And he had the shoulders to weave that narrative. It's a horrific lie and an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic narrative, but a successful one that he was able to weave together with Jimmy Carter. Again, at our law school, there was this club that was to the left, and they would give prizes to all these guys. We protested that as well. Just a quick story is that at the law school, which is a Jewish law school created by Yeshiva University, Desmond Tutu was about to receive the prize. So we were organizing a protest, and we were called into the dean's office, Dean Rudenstein, and he said to me, and I was the leader of the protest movement, and he said to me, Yishai, no problem, you could protest, but outside the school. I said to him, Dean Rudenstein, the Jewish people created this law school because we weren't allowed to go to other law schools because of anti-Semitism. And so now we have a law school that protected us from anti-Semites like Desmond Tutu. Now I'm going to be forced out of my Jewish law school, the Jewish money built, so that this anti-Semite could come and walk these halls. That's not right. And being a great lawyer, Rudenstein says to me, you're right. And we protested inside. And guess what? You know, if you ever wanted to see Desmond Tutu have a lemony, sour face when he walked into the law school and he saw our protest and he saw our media coverage, he was unhappy that he had chosen to receive the prize in Manhattan at Cardozo Law School. When we finished that business, we actually got married in the second year of our law school. We came to Israel to get married. I didn't want to get married in America. I wanted to get married in Israel, and we got married at the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs in Hebron. Why Hebron? Because it's one of the Jewish people's most ancient sites. It's Abraham's first purchase in the land of Israel. It's the tomb of the founders of the Jewish people. It's a nationalist site as opposed to a religious site. It's the founding members of our tribe, of our peoplehood. And Jews have been bullied there, even though we have lived there for over 3,000 years, almost without break. We had been bullied there for the last many years, starting in 1929, the horrible riots. That was just simply the 7th of October back in 1929. And we wanted to get married next to our forefathers and mothers. And we did. And that wedding is credited as the wedding that restarted that ancient tradition of getting married in Hebron. And since then, every summer, we have many, many weddings. Not a week goes by without a wedding. We went back to law school for another year. And then we were finally, when we were done with that, we got a job in Israel working for Arutz Sheva, Israel National News. And I became the head of the radio station there. And we moved to Beit El, Israel, which is a beautiful community, so-called settlement next to Ramallah. We were there for 7 years. Then we moved to a harder core place, which is, when I say hardcore, it means that we have to face off with jihadis. We lived on the Mount of Olives, within a complex on the Mount of Olives, which is surrounded by the broader Ras El Amud neighborhood. We had some good experiences and not a few bad experiences as well with the neighbors there. And finally, about 7 years ago, we moved to Efrat. I was able to get a job in Hebron, back in Hebron, as the international spokesman and really the director of international affairs and fundraising and building and all kinds of stuff. And so I wanted to get closer to Hebron. So we moved to this beautiful community, Efrat, which is the neighbor of Bethlehem. And for me, being a lover of the Bible, when I drive out out of the town, I see a sign that says to the left, Hebron and Beersheba, and to the right, Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and nothing could make me happier. If you are biblically inclined, if these places mean something to you, if you associate Hebron with Abraham and not just with Baruch Goldstein, if you associate Bethlehem with King David and the book of Ruth, when you associate Jerusalem not as Al-Quds and the Al-Aqsa flood, but you associate it with 2 Jewish commonwealths and 2 Jewish temples that stood, and hopefully a third one as well, then you get excited about these biblical names being on the road when you leave your house. To me, it's exciting. To me, it's moving every single day. I am a Zionist. I am a nationalist. You might want to call me an ultra-nationalist, whatever. You know, I ultra love my wife. I ultra love my country. Big deal. So I'm an ultra husband, okay? And I'm ultra nationalist. I don't think that those words carry much meaning. It just means I'm passionate about it. The job in Hebron is complex in the sense that Hebron is a much maligned Jewish community. For a lot of social and technical reasons, it's become a favorite of the international and Israeli left as a target. That being said, Hebron continues to grow, continues to attract, on a normal, non-corona, non-war year, about 1 million visitors to the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs, which is an amazing site. It is a Herodian structure, but unlike other Herodian buildings, it is not a rubble. It is not a mound. It is a fully standing and erect Jewish site. It's a Jewish building built on top of Jewish tombs. It has Muslim history and Christian history as well. But it's an amazing site. And recouping the Jewish heritage of that town is a passion, And with that, a general passion for the rights of Jews in Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, the so-called occupied West Bank. It is the heartland of Israel. It is much more Israel than Tel Aviv is Israel. It's much, much more Israel than Tel Aviv is Israel because for the last 2,000 years of exile, the land that mothers would tell their children about when they would go to sleep, it was not the coastal plain of Tel Aviv. God bless it. It's a great place, and I'm a big lover of Tel Aviv. But it was the heartland, the mountain region in the middle of the country that goes from Beersheba to Hebron to Bethlehem to Jerusalem to Bethel, to Shiloh, to Shechem, and then finally to the Jezreel Valley. It's that heartland in the middle of the country, which is the heartland of the Holy Land. And that's what I'm so proud to live here and to fight for our rights. There have been a lot of mistakes made by the Jewish state, mistakes that need to be rectified, and various mistakes. You might be surprised at some of the mistakes that I think the state of Israel has made. But the chief mistake that it made was that in the Six-Day War, it did not, well, let's just take one step back. 1948, we win the War of Independence, yet we lose the heartland. We lose the heartland. We lose most of Jerusalem. We certainly lose Hebron and Bethel. We lose these places to a Jordanian occupation, a fake country created by colonialist British interests. They brought somebody who had nothing to do with that area to rule there. They wanted to do their Hashemite friends a favor. And now he rules these really Palestinian Arabs, and in 1948, with British aid, with British arms, they take a good chunk of the heartland of Israel. In 1967, the Six-Day War, we liberate that land. We kick out the fake Jordanian occupation. The problem is that the state of Israel was not mentally, spiritually, physically ready to annex and assert sovereignty over that heartland. That was mistake number one. And we ruled it for a long time like a type of territory. And Israel simply did not assert its statehood on this land. But then in the 90s went to a much worse process in which we really stabbed the land of Israel in the back and began a process of empowering jihadists. Remember, Yasser Arafat, though secular, always would say in his speeches, a jihad, a jihad, a jihad. There's many speeches of, you can see it on YouTube. He was a secular jihadist. The state of Israel empowered him to take control of this land because they didn't know what to do with the Arabs. And so instead they created this jihadist, corrupt, anti-Semitic, oppressive system for Arabs as well called the Palestinian Authority. And they made signs that said no Israelis allowed, but what they meant is no Jews allowed. And this was a horrible mistake of the 90s. That mistake kept going in the 2000s. In the 90s, I was in America, but in the 2000s, 2005, we continued that awful mistake in the Gaza Strip. In the Gaza Strip, Israel had been controlling since the Six-Day War and had created the left-wing liberal government, the labor government. They were the ones that created so-called settlements, nascent Jewish communities in Gaza. Why? Because there was Gazan terrorists And so the state of Israel put in these communities in order to thwart the terrorism, in order to assert Israeli control there, and to put in the IDF. In 2005, my wife Malka and I went down as part of our job at Arutz Sheva to protest and to cover the 2005 disengagement. We thought we could stop it. And our claim was not some kind of biblical, messianic, or Kahanist claim. Our claim was very simple. If you give away this land, the jihad is going to take over and it's going to create a terror state next door. Then they'll be doing rockets and tunnels and kites and who knows what else. And so therefore, we implore you, State of Israel, do not do this. It's a big, fat mistake. You're going to regret it. That was our claim. Of course, we were right from day one and day two and day three until finally there were many skirmishes, battles, and wars fought with Hamas, Gaza, and that led finally to the October 7th massacre. The October 7th massacre was predated also by yet another mistake. And that mistake was the unexcusable crime of handing over murderers and terrorists for the sake of releasing one hostage. 1,000 terrorists were released. We protested that. We said, of course we want our hostages back home, and we should fight for them to get back home. But to give away these terrorists who are sitting in our jails means to resupply the Hamas bloodline with hardened killers, proven killers who have tasted blood. You will just bring more hostages through this process, we said. Of course, it's now well known that that process led to the release of many of the leaders of the October 7th massacre, including Sinwar. And it was all for the release of one Israeli hostage. We thought it was a bad deal, an incorrect policy. And that led to October the 7th. What has changed for a person like me since October the 7th? Nothing. Nothing. Nothing changed for me. Not my thinking, not my read on reality. Nothing changed. The state of Israel is starting to change. People in Israel are starting to change. There's a tremendous move towards a common sense. You might call it right wing, call it hawkish. You could call it whatever you want. But the bottom line is, it is undermining, thankfully, the bad idea of the two-state solution, the bad idea of land giveaway. It sadly has not yet undermined the idiotic idea of giving away hardened murderers to get our hostages back home. It has not yet undermined that, and that's because of a very strong media campaign, which we also know, by the way, we know factually is also Hamas and Iranian propelled forward, that the hostages narrative and doctrine. In any case, we are in a different place today in Israel. The state of Israel has changed. People like myself have not changed. I could just say, well, this is, I kind of told you so. This is what we foresaw. And that's all on record. You could read the articles, see the videos, the radio that we did. We said it over and over again because we were so concerned for the life of our state and of our fellow Israelis. In any case, today we live in a time where we've reached a new plateau, and that new plateau is the arrival, the advent of President Trump. President Trump's understandings. Now, to me, I wish I didn't need a President Trump. I wish we didn't need it. I wish we would have the same common sense. Now they're talking about kicking out Mahmoud Khalil because he's a jihadist that went to Colombia. To me, I wish we would have that same common sense. I wish we didn't need a President Trump to bring that spirit in. But sadly, we are as we have been for eternity. We are very influenced by the outside world, and finally, that's starting to there's some common sense is starting to land on our head that maybe we should push out jihadis, maybe we should clean Gaza out from jihadis, maybe we should assert sovereignty over our own ancestral homeland, and finally announce a border after 75 years. Actually, announce that we have a western border in the Jordan Valley. So common sense is slowly starting to drip in to the Israeli mindset, very slowly. There's also another advent here in Israel, which is the advent of things like Channel 14, which have had a big impact on the Israeli psyche, and more consciousness-raising events that are reshaping the mindset. For people like myself, we continue to push forward politically, on the land itself, holding on to our land, to the hilltops, pushing back and calling for the removal and the dismantling of the Palestinian Authority, talking about reasonable ways to assert sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, finding status for non-Jews who live in our land and want a decent life amongst us. I wrote an article in the New York Times about 5 alternatives to the two-state solution, and I just see it on my wall here. And we are trying very much to help convince people that there's a different way instead of the foolish land giveaway option, instead of just one last story before I turn it over to you. I was recently with a colleague, and we were on tour of the South Hebron Hills. And inside these beautiful biblical ancient mountains, we saw a river, a beautiful river. But when we got close to that beautiful river, we realized what it was. It was endless tons of Palestinian sewage, untreated, flowing from all the Hebron cities, Hebron, Chalchul, Yatta, and the 800,000 people's untreated sewage flowing through our mountains, destroying the aquifer underneath it. Just being able to see the joke of a governance that we are not doing in our own land. And we know that the governance of the Arab situation in Israel in general, even not in Judea and Samaria, is very lacking. For example, we know that in the South Israel and the Negev communities, including Beersheba, almost all stores and businesses pay protection rackets to Bedouin tribes, thugs. And we know the same thing in the North. Our country is not governing strongly. And we see this river of human waste flowing and poisoning nature right there. All it needs is a treatment plant. It's nothing. Israel's an expert at treatment plants and water reclamation. And yet, here's what we see with our own eyes. And so we are preaching a stronger Israel, an Israel that is going to govern, an Israel that's going to control its populations, an Israel that understands that it's a small Jewish state, a defensive Jewish state in a broader hostile region, and that it has to behave not like an uber Western state, but as a Middle Eastern state with some beautiful Western values, but never to take the eye off the sights and the hand off the trigger. It's a tough neighborhood, and you have to behave in this fashion. Many countries around us have laws against jihadism, including Egypt, including the UAE, including Saudi Arabia, and yet Israel allows jihadism not only to be the thing that educates the Arab town right next door to me. It's also found even in our Knesset, calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. And so I conclude with saying it's time to wake up. Let October 7th be a wake up. Let the Trump administration be a wake up. Let the opportunity be a wake up for a stronger policy of governance and control. I'm not saying we have to, kick out every Arab. I'm saying that we have to fight jihadism and assert our nation state's rights on its ancestral land. That's my opening statement, and I've got some time to take some questions from you.
Thank you very much, Yishai. Thank you for these strong words and honest words and understandable words, very understandable words. I'm glad we had an opportunity to hear this, and I would love for people to who have questions, who wish to present, another point of view, or who wish to simply understand other aspects of the problem that Yishai has raised, to please either raise your hands with the icon or send a message on chat. And
there are many. I see many hands already up. I see Alexander's hand up, and I see.
Okay, so
I see a lot of good folks.
Yeah. Let's start with our dear friend Shale Horowitz.
Thank you, Yishai. So my questions, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on the plans that you talked about. In other words, the idea of asserting full sovereignty creates a number of difficult problems, which I would ask you to address for us. So one is what of course is going to be the political status of those large Arab populations in the big cities, and not just what is your vision, but what is potentially likely to happen given that we have, multiple governments changing over time into the future that will have to oversee that situation. So how can that be managed in a way which does not create major risks to Israel demographically, politically, and so on? Thank you.
Okay, Shale. Fair questions indeed. Um, the heart of the issue is what is the status of non-Jews in our land in general, in Little Israel and in Judea and Samaria as well. So I assert that first thing before we even go on, let's just put a philosophical brick down so that we can understand at least where I'm coming from. I think democracy is great. I think it's beautiful. I do not think that it's the number one value, nor do I think it's a co-equal value with a Jewish state. Jewish state was established to defend the Jewish people. It's a protectorate. There's a definitional problem with having full democracy and a nation state be of equal footing because they're two different. They are two different. They're at variance with one another because they're two different trajectories. One favors one nationality and one does not favor a nationality. So for me. It's obvious that Israel has got to be a nation state first and foremost. That's a first kind of philosophical brick. The second thing is that I believe that we should have a much broader resident alien status, residency status, much broader. A residency status, by the way, the Torah calls it ger toshav, resident alien. And it's basically to say, if you're a non-Jew living in this land, there will be status for you. And there'll be upward mobility and good roads and education and good hospitals and accessibility and freedom of movement, all that stuff. But you have to be willing to be a resident alien of the Jewish state and you'll enjoy its benefits and you'll also have responsibilities. And that has to be a much broader concept. And so the first thing I would do is Arabs who are non-jihadists should receive status in the state of Israel as residency. I want to remind us that even America, which is one of the world's greatest democracies, even it has different statuses for different peoples. For example, Puerto Rico. Now, you may like it or not like it, but Puerto Rico does not vote for president, and it votes for congressmen and senators, but they are non-voting congressmen and senators, right? So they get to vote, but their vote doesn't really has no teeth in the same way because it's a territory. Okay, whatever. I'm not saying we have exactly Puerto Rico. What I'm saying is, look, different situations call for different things. We are an ethnic minority in this region. If you thought that the ethnic minority autonomous region of Kurdistan in northern Iraq is going to give equal rights to Turks, Syrians, and Persians, Iranians, you are sadly mistaken. That is not the way that this region operates. So we have a nation state. So what do we have to do? We have to assert sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, give the people there who are proven non-jihadists residency, and then they should get medical care. They should, of course, pay taxes, and they should, of course, serve in national service or army, and they will get the awards and the benefits of the Jewish state with responsibilities for being a resident of the Jewish state. Truth of the matter is, it's really not that tricky. Okay, it's not that tricky. Moreover, Israel should create, and it's being discussed right now, at least about Gaza, an assistance program for voluntary emigration. We should help Arabs, and Arabs want opportunities to move to the UAE, and they want to move to other countries that have opened their doors to them: Australia, Canada, Spain, Scotland. Chile has a huge so-called Palestinian population. The bottom line is there is a way forward. It's not that tricky. It makes sense as long as you understand that first and foremost, the Jewish state is just that, a Jewish state.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Yishai, Matthew Diamond.
Yes, here I am.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting, and I've watched a lot of your videos on YouTube. My question was that you said that you have an editorial, I think, in New York Times with 5 possible solutions. So I think you've already started to talk about that, but I'd be curious to if you can, can make it within time limits to hear the 5 possible solutions. And just one quick comment about this migration of Palestinians. I think that's I see the point of that, but it's also very worrisome for people living in Europe and the United States because people who come from that region, Palestinians, Arabs, and so on, Syrians, Turks, whatever, they become a very powerful political force, which subverts the other government, the French government, the British government. I'd say that currently the U.S. government is rather resistant to that, but you see the point. Do we want that influence to bring down the European societies, South American, etc.? So thank you.
Thank you for your question, Matthew. You know what's funny about the Palestinian problem is that you say that they're a danger in Europe and France and England and Belgium, but the same thing happened to Palestinians that went to Kuwait, who were pro Saddam Hussein, and then they were kicked out, and then the same thing happened with Palestinians in Lebanon, who destabilized South Lebanon, and then the same thing happened with Palestinians, the PLO in Jordan, which destabilized Jordan. So we have a problem. I mean, the problem is, and here again, I blame the state of Israel. Really, sometimes it just wells up inside, and it's just like, how could you have allowed the brainwashing of generation after generation practically in your borders? How could you have allowed that, Israel? How could you have allowed? We know what Palestinian school books are. We know what they are. How could you have allowed this to happen here next door to you in your ancestral land? How could you have allowed generations of children to be brainwashed? And these are questions that are, that the right-wing governments should have to answer for. How could you have allowed such a thing? And so, and you see these videos of children being manhandled and brainwashed, and you see it. You see the hate that they're taught. And so the first thing is, before we even go on talking about where to send Palestinians, I mean, turn that thing off right now. Turn the key on the evil of education, of hateful jihadist education. With regarding to moving them out and where they would destabilize, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. But at the same time, I have to be concerned with the state of Israel. But, they moved to Chile. I don't remember that's been a big problem. They could move to North Africa, help out those countries. They could move. I mean, they need a process of de-radicalization, denazification. They need that. And they could also move, by the way, there's a great opportunity right now in Ukraine. There's a great opportunity. And there's an opportunity to stay as well. Let me be clear. There is an opportunity to stay here, but you have to renounce jihadism. Renounce it. And the state of Israel should also make that a compulsory thing, because if you actually understand Arabs, you understand that they sometimes will prefer it if you force them. That way they don't have to give up their honor and say something that's in their mind anti-Islam or anything like that. So therefore, by forcing them, you're actually helping them save face. But the state of Israel, weak in its governance, allows jihadism to really run amok. And from time to time, we so-called mow the lawn, and then, the grass keeps growing again. So that's with regarding to those countries. You're right. There's a problem in that, but I don't have exactly a different solution. Other than a process of denazification, which is a serious process, which I don't see the state of Israel having the wherewithal to get to yet. But they do go to the UAE, and the UAE knows very well how to handle them. The UAE is very tough on jihadism. They do go to Saudi Arabia. They work there, and Saudi Arabia knows very well how to deal with jihadism. So there are ways to do it. And one thing is for sure, I don't want jihadists in my borders or on my borders. And that's baseline for what the Jewish state has to ensure. Right now, we have jihadists. Not only are they in our borders, on our borders, they're in our Knesset. So the state of Israel, really is it really doesn't it really is not acting like a Middle East country at all yet. And I do hope that we're going through. I hope that October 7th is the beginning of a consciousness change. Let's go on.
Thank you, Yishai. Thank you. May I just add something on this point? Because, some of these debates about especially this debate about Israel and the Palestinians, it reminds me of Kant's antinomies, where you can prove that the world was never created in time, and you can also prove that that's impossible. So you have a situation where either side doesn't work. So it's kind of irrelevant which side you pick in a way, because there's no solution in these situations. You can say, I think what I hear in Israel is, we've been trying this two-state solution for so much time, and we know that doesn't work. We don't really know what other possibilities there might be, but there has to be some possibility, because this doesn't work. And we've been doing it over and over again.
I don't think it's so tricky what the other possibility is. It's just nobody wants to try it. The other possibility is just say no to jihadism in our land, assert strength, and govern like a Middle East country has to govern, and make sure that there's a serious pushback against jihadism and a reward system for those people who renege on it. And of course, without a doubt, we also have to help many leave. We have to help folks leave as well. I don't want to like fake it. I really don't like faking it. One of the things that I pride myself on is that at the end of this conversation, I hope you think to yourself, I don't know if I like what he said. I don't know if I agree with what he said, but he said to me his truth. And he represents a vision and a truth, and that's what I want to say. I don't want to mince. I don't want to fake it. I want to say, listen, there's really too many folks, too many Arab folks, too many Palestinian folks, and certainly too many jihadists for a Jewish state to be able to digest, and that we have to help them leave, and that's partially what Trump is saying about Gaza right now.
Okay, thank you, Yishai. Ricardo.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your great presentation. So you've pointed out some of the mistakes made by politicians and by the security establishment, as well as mistakes that continue to be made. So I live in Avnei Hefetz, and I've been talking to a lot of people who had and still have the boots on the ground. And I would say that the perception is that there is a big rift between the lower rank majority inside the army and the minority who are the actual policymakers. So my question is, considering that even with the current opportunity that we have with the Trump government, our theoretically right-wing political echelon is putting people with the same liberal European mentality in power. So what do you expect for the next 10 years?
Ricardo, very good question, and I want you to know that I served in Avnei Hefetz in patrols over there. I know the area; it's a beautiful area. But your question is not so much a policy question; it is a sociological question, and also a question about the makeup of how the state of Israel operates. And I want to tell you that Gabriel gave a nice introduction to me, but one of the things he didn't say was that I'm also now a councilman in my town here in Judea, in Efrat. And I've learned that the state of Israel's apparatus is deeply socialist all the way through and deeply bureaucratic all the way through. And this is also in my dealings in Knesset and stuff. All I mean to say is, this is not a country of revolution. It's not like America, where revolution is baked into the idea of the country. It's not a country that thinks that government should be small. It's a socialism which thinks that government should be big, and bureaucracy is the number one employer in the country. And change is hard here. We have a media, we have an academia, we have a court system, which is all set the other way. They are the remnants of the so-called WASPs, white, Ashkenazi, secular paratroopers who basically helped create the political state and have seized control of it for a long time. Rooting their thinking out is not easy. Change in this country is not easy. It's a much more consensus type country. And you could see even by the polls right now that what the people want is basically the politicians who have said the least, who are the least clear, who are kind of, as we say in Yiddish, nishka here, nishka higher, right? Like not here, not there. They want to keep bumbling from the middle. And so therefore change is not an easy thing in the Jewish state. That being said, I believe that we're in an amazing and providential process. To me, whenever I get depressed, I only have to look at the building of Jerusalem, and I go back to all those verses that say that God will rebuild Jerusalem, and I see it being built. And so I have faith that the state of Israel will continue to change. Your question, what will be, I will replace for myself with what shall I do to move the process forward. And I do my stuff to move the process forward. In Hebron, in the Knesset, in YouTube, whatever I know how to do, I push forward, and I'm teaching my kids to do that. And like you said, the lower echelons have clear thinking, have common sense, and or you want to call it, nationalist right-wing thinking. That will, at some level, trickle up. It might take a long time due to the nature of the system here, which could use a lot of reform. But the reform is not there yet. Reform is hostilely contested, any kind of reform. And so we will continue to bumble forward. We'll continue to survive. We'll continue to employ ridiculous half measures that don't solve things. But we'll get there. It'll get there. It might be more than 10 years. It might be more than 10 years. That's just the nature. The question that you asked, I'm just trying to say, is more not in the realm of ideas, but in the realm of, in my opinion, but in the realm of the system and how it operates. And our system is a slow, bureaucratic, very top-heavy system that doesn't change easily.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind, we have a lot of people still asking questions. Please keep your questions short so that we can get to as many people as possible. And Julie Pandavar?
Yishai, thank you very much. And I'm very, very pleased to meet you at long last. I have to set time for introductions. You asked for introductions in the beginning.
Yes,
Nobody's
please.
done it? Okay. I live in Central Europe, and I work with colleagues in Ariel and in Australia. We are setting up a think tank focused on psychological warfare for Israel. I think that's the most pertinent introduction at this point. So look out for the 1903 Society. That's us. Yishai, I have two questions, one of which is easy and one of which is hard. And I think in the interest of everybody getting a chance to ask a question, I'm going to ask the easy question, but I'm going to ask you please to get in touch with me through the emails that I'd sent you, so we can deal with a hard question, okay? So the easy question in the interest of time is, you have, when you talked about Hebron a moment ago, you stressed that it was a nationalist site that was of importance. It was not a religious site. I was quite intrigued to hear that, because I match that up with what I often notice when you speak about the land of Israel and the biblical heartland and the justification for the existence of the state. You often stress that the basis of Israel and arguing for it has to be biblical. And I don't think it's unfair to say that you you disparage the nationalist arguments. That's how it comes across to me. If somebody makes a legal argument for Israel or an historical argument, you kind of poo-poo that in favor of the biblical argument. And I wonder whether I'm just reading that wrong, or whether you understand that the biblical supersedes all other possible arguments. It seems to me that the more arguments there are for Israel, the better, biblical and otherwise.
Anjuli, is that the way?
Anjuli, yes, Anjuli, that's correct.
Okay. First thing is, thank you very much for your question, and I will relate to your email when I get it. That's number one. Number two, your very last point, I agree with fully and totally, which is that many strata of argumentation they buttress one another, and they strengthen one another. I'll tell you where you may have understood me to be an arguer for just biblical stuff. I'll explain that in just one second. But that is not correct. I believe strongly that Israel actually has, I think, 5 loci of rights where rights derive from. And I don't remember them in my order right now. It's purchase. We've purchased lots of land here. We are the indigenous people of this land. We have archaeology to prove it. We've had 2 commonwealths in this land previously. There have been no other sovereigns that have had a state based out of here, based out of Jerusalem. We have also won land in defensive wars. We also actually have great international law recognition of Jewish rights. 1917 Balfour Declaration, 1920 1920 San Remo Accords, 1923 League of Nations mandate for I add in parentheses, a Jewish Palestine. Okay, sometimes that's misinterpreted. So we have many loci of rights. Another loci is locus of rights is beautification. We have put in tremendous effort into beautifying and loving this land. So I mark all of those. But the reason that you'll hear me talk a lot about biblical stuff is because that's what actually affects my Arab cousins and neighbors. It is Arab cousins and neighbors who tell me all the time. There's a great video I played the other day on my channel. They say, when you guys talk about the Holocaust being the source of your rights, we don't understand what you're talking about. If you say you're the Bani Ibrahim, the Bani Israel, if you say you're the children of Jacob and Abraham, if you say that Allah gave you this land, we respect that. We fear that. It's in our Quran. So I'm trying to corroborate a consciousness that's already there instead of hyper anchoring our rights in a secular liberal worldview. And by the way, the Israeli, the ones that I really poo-poo is not the nationalist. I never poo-poo the nationalist claim. Remember, my sense of who I am first comes from my parents, who were secular Russian nationalists, Zionists. So that's where I come from. I'll tell you what I poo-poo. And that may have caused, maybe I was not clear enough. What I poo-poo proudly and loudly is the sense of rights that derives from victimization, from a sense that we were victimized and that's why we deserve this land. The so-called Yad Vashem way of anchoring Jewish rights in the land of Israel. Recently, I was on the phone with one of my left-wing friends, and she's a known writer and now a movie maker, and I said to her, "How's October 7th, post October 7th?" She says, "It's been very hard." I said, "Describe to me what's hard for you." So she says to me, "I've been very disappointed in the international left." I said, "Why?" She says, "Because they don't accept me." I rolled my eyes. The international left doesn't accept you. Good morning. And I said to her, "What do you mean by not accepting you?" So this floored me. She goes, "They don't accept that I'm also a victim." One second. Sorry about that. She says, one second, let me turn off the WhatsApp here 1 second so it doesn't interrupt anymore. She says to me, does everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. She says to me, she goes, they don't accept that I'm a victim. I'm only an Israeli aggressor. So my eyes, I couldn't believe her whole consciousness is, please, international left, accept me too as a victim. I have a right to live here because of Bibas. I have a right to live here because of the Holocaust. I said to her, not only does even though people pay lip service to supporting victims, that's only certain kind of victims, not Jewish victims. And second thing, that is just so not cool. Where is your sense of coolness? That's what you think is going to be cool out there, is be like, please accept me as a victim. They don't even accept you as a victim. Now you're like sucking up to victimhood status. Oh my God, you have completely lost any sense of like, where's the Israeli machismo? Where's Israeli bravado? Where's Israeli strength? I ask my friends on the left, which day do you think that the world liked Israel better? The day after the 6-Day War or the day after the Oslo Accords? Of course, the answer is the day after the 6-Day War, when Israel was big, bold, and badass, and not this wimpy, feel bad for me, give me sympathy state. Do you really think that that's a source of rights? It's not. And it just does not. This whole war, what was the apex of this war so far? The beeper attack, right? The beeper operation, right? Why? Because Israel was big, bold, and badass instead of being wimpy and looking for sympathy. And so if you understood from me that I reject nationalist claims, that's not true. I embrace nationalist claims. I even embrace international law, not as a god, but when it recognizes my ancestral rights, I respect that, and I'm proud to talk about that. And also purchase rights and war rights, all those various sources of rights. But it's important to anchor it in ancestral heritage and traditional. In the end, our indigeneity and our archaeology links up with the biblical. They're really one thing. It's really one consciousness. It's not just that, it's not only theological, it's also historical. The Bible is also a book of history. And second thing, it's very important that we understand that if we want to speak the language of this region, using a theological language is powerful. And using a Yad Vashem language is wimpy around here and doesn't sound right. So I want to make that clear. And yeah, I guess thank you very much for that question.
Okay, thank you very much. Jamie Nigri, you're next online. Please introduce yourself briefly.
I live in Netanya. I'm an Ole Hadash for years in Israel, and I don't have. I'm not a leftist, not a rightist. I'm an Israeli, and I defend everything that's in favor of Israel. I'm an activist, and well, thank you for a presentation. Wonderful, Yishai. And I know we have a lot of questions inside, but I'd like to listen from you about the threat that Iran represents. I think they back all these people who are in our borders, and I'd like to know, how do you see them as a threat? In what level, and how we should face them?
Jamie, thank you very much for your question. We all know what Iran is. We all know what it is. We all know, by the way, that it tortures its own people all the time. I was in Florida shopping at a one of the big American stores. And this lady comes up to me. She goes, "Do you need any help?" And I couldn't tell what her accent was exactly. And we got to talking a little bit, an older lady. And it turned out that she was an Iranian Muslim. When she found out that I work with the state of Israel and for the political camp that I work for in the state of Israel, she just dropped everything and gave me all her time to help me buy 2 suits. They're two of my favorite suits. I said to her, "Why are you giving me so much time?" She goes, "I know that your people will help my people." She says to me, "I know that they are torturing our people and they cut the eye." I remember she said this to me. She says, "They cut the eyes out of our young boys in the torture chambers." this is our neighbors. This is what they're doing to people next door. I have a, we call Israel a innovation nation. I have a different name for it. How about we call it liberation nation? How about we help the millions of Iranian people come out from under the thumb of the Iranian regime? Iran, Qatar, Syria. Did you see what happened in Syria the minute that the Assad regime left? When you just opened up a little bit, you saw the evil that these people do, torturing tens of thousands of people daily for years. They're sick. And that's what's all around us. So you got the Iranians, you got the Qataris, you got the new Syrian government is not that great either, right? And you got what they're doing right now to the Alawites and all that. Okay, we know what these folks are, and there's more of them. The Hamas. There's plenty of videos of Hamas shooting dissidents, Arab dissidents in Gaza right now. You're surprised why nobody, President Trump said, he said, I'm surprised that there were no people that were helping the Jews. Well, A, most of them are brainwashed, and B, whoever does help the Jews just gets shot in the head.
Yeah.
So come on, let's be real. Listen, again, I'll tell you the truth. I say this lovingly. Jamie, I want to say this lovingly. You asked a question, but there's something that's a little bit annoying about that. And I'll tell you why I'm annoyed a little bit. Because we all know. We all know what it is. We all know what these people are. Everybody knows. I've been hearing Netanyahu talk about Iran for 25 years. I was an intern at AIPAC, I think closer to 30 years ago, and I heard Netanyahu talk about these things. Mm-hmm. So come on, let's go already. Let's get rid of the bad people. Let's push back on them. Let's not make more intellectual discussions. What is the danger of Iran? We know them. They are an organization, a thuggish, suppressive organization that funds everybody, that killed the Buenos Aires Jews in Amia, and continue to support every evil thing in this world. They are behind the October 7th massacre. And they say they'll do it again and again and again. Look at this guy even on Twitter, Khomeini. He makes it clear what he wants. He wants to see a world without Israel. Remember, what was his name? No, it wasn't Rafsanjani. What was his name? A president of Iran. Remember, he had that big Ahmadinejad, right? And he had this big. Remember, he had a lectern, and it was a whole speech that he gave, a world without Zionism. It was a Hitlerian call to destroy the Jews. So we know what they are. The real question, Jamie, is not who they are, because we know. The question is, who are we? That's the question. And right now, we are a country that has not yet decided to tackle this problem head on. And it's a country that, if I may be allowed to be biblical for a second, we're still very much Jacob as opposed to Israel. Jacob, he knows how to exist in the diaspora. He knows how to maneuver. He knows how to play it safe. He knows how to be a little bit tricky, how to arrange things so that he survives. But he is not the ruler and the sovereign and the governor. That name is Israel. And we are very much still in a Jacob, or let's call it a different name, a ghetto type of mindset. By the way, what is the two-state solution but a ghetto-ness? Let's shrink. We'll shrink to Tel Aviv. Give them what they want. Give the Hamas what they want. It's a ghetto mentality. It really is. It's like, I'll shrink and defend myself, and hopefully I'll just stay here in Tel Aviv and drink my latte and everything will be okay. My café four. It's a ghetto mentality, and that's Jacob as opposed to Israel. And I think it's time for us to graduate. So my answer to you is, we know who Iran is. The question is who Israel is.
Thank you, Yishai. Thank you. Maria, you have your hand up.
Hello. Thank you very much. I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm going to tell you that I'm following the Israel-Palestine issue since many years. And I'm going to tell you that I've been living for 10 years in Jerusalem. So, Yishai, of course, I want to tell you that I'm going to ask you some challenging questions, and I hope you will appreciate. For me, it was very interesting to listen And actually, of the whole argument that you have used, I really understand your passion when it comes to the biblical, origin, and your enthusiasm about, the land, the Abraham tombs, etc. But I find that sometimes there is a little bit of confusion between, the beauty, the call of the ancestors, the fathers, and then a mix with, international law, with the Jewishness, with the modern Jewishness. For example, I read a lot about Zionism that has somehow transformed the Jewishness from the victimhood, and I think this is more or less what you said, from the victim to the strong. But I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we need all to speak the same language. Otherwise, Yishai, I come from Rome. I am originally from Rome. So sometimes I say, okay, so I go with my Latin books and I go to claim the rest of the Mediterranean. So I have to give up some of the argument if I want to be with the rest of the humanity, if I recognize that I am the same as the rest of the humanity. So I think that there are many things interesting that you say, but the rule of the game must be the same for everybody. And I would like to allow me to correct something when you mentioned the Balfour Declaration as legitimation. I want to remind that the Balfour Declaration of 1917 was issued by the British while they had no rule whatsoever, no right whatsoever on that piece of land that was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. So I would not take it a Balfour Declaration like international law.
Maria, the Balfour Declaration was a recognition that England was about to break this very authoritarian empire into pieces and give people. Remember, the breakdown of the Ottoman Empire meant the liberation of peoples. It meant people having their own the birth of nations, the recognition of their indigenous and ancestral rights. That's what Israel is. Israel is part of the break of the Ottoman Empire and then the birth of many countries through that. Right? Remember that the San Remo Accords gave birth to Iraq, which was called Mesopotamia, to Syria, to Israel, and later on to also Jordan. People got their lands back. The Balfour Declaration was a declaration that later on was also talked about in the League of Nations, which was these points of the Wilsonian idea that birth of nations will people will have rights to their ancestral homeland. So. Let's not poo-poo the Balfour Declaration and say, well, they didn't have a right to it. The point was that they were breaking a horrific empire that was subjectifying people all over the world. Okay, but then
Yishai,
wait a minute. And then after the Balfour Declaration, it was accepted by the principal powers that broke those empires, including the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And then later on, the League of Nations, I think it was 56 or 54 countries got together and voted to recognize the mandate for a Jewish Palestine, to create a Palestine. So I don't know why you're harping on Balfour Declaration. It's just one of a whole series of things that led to recognition. That's number one. Number two, with regarding to what you said about Romans. Look, first thing is, you still have an Italy. Okay, your Italy is still at the end a construct of that empire that existed 2,000 years ago, and so is Romania, right? Okay, you guys have your thing. Our Jewish state, we were kicked out by, actually, with all due respect, by Rome. We were kicked out from our land, and we have been dispersed around the world, and now we're getting our rights to come back to our land. We're asserting our rights. By the way, Maria, how many nations are there in the world? Social scientists believe that there's about 3,000 nations around the world. Yeah. And yet there's only about 194 countries. We happen to be one of those nations that were able to reassert our right in our land. We fought for it. We won it. The world recognized, not granted, recognized our ancestral connection to that land. We have every right to our ancestral homeland. We fought it. The Ottomans were conquerors. Before them, the Mamluks were conquerors. Before them, the Crusaders were conquerors. Before them, the Byzantines were conquerors. Before that, the Romans were conquerors. Nobody else had a capital in Jerusalem. We had two commonwealths here. It's our land. It always has been our land. It's not the Crusaders, and it's not the Byzantines, and it's certainly not the absolutely created mythology of a Palestine, which never existed, has zero history in this land. The majority of the Arabs that are here in this land came because of Zionism, because Israel brought jobs and economic opportunity. The majority of Palestinians are economic migrants to this area. And certainly the conquest of Islam into Africa, into the Middle East, and into the Levant should not be seen as that they have asserted rights. They are a conquering empire, and now they've been pushed back a little bit. What's wrong with that? We're a people, we're back. Now, I want to say this, Maria, one last point to you, please. One last point, which is this. If you accept my argumentation or you don't accept my argumentation, that's okay. I've given you biblical argumentation. I've given you international law argumentation. I've given you argumentation about rights that we have received because we purchased land, because we won it in wars. We have many, many, many reasons for having this right. If you can't see it, and I wish, by the way, as a Roman person, a person from Rome, that you'd be like, you know what, that's historical justice. You know, we did an injustice to these people, and now justice is that they're back. If you can accept that, great. But if you can't accept it, what can I do? I'm going to have to keep holding on to my land, and I'm certainly not going to buy total liberal progressive bullshit that this is somebody else's land and I should give away my land to the jihad. That is crap. And that is stuff that is fraudulent, a created mythology.
I'm sorry, I need to get in here because you are not being legit.
Hold on.
About international law, you have to also recognize international law in its broadest terms. There's ICJ rulings.
I don't have to.
Israel is on trial for genocide.
I don't have to. I will recognize what I think is just. What is unjust, I don't have to recognize.
That is currently being conducted by Israel. You cannot say international law is not a pick and choose.
It is. It absolutely is. I happen to have a degree in international law, and it exactly is that. And I completely disagree with you. If something you
can disagree with me, but it's international law that is very clear.
It's not very clear. It's anything but clear, and there's many debate on it.
Really?
Don't tell me. The minute you say it's very clear, the minute that you say it's very clear, that means that you don't really know what the status is. It's not very clear.
Tell me,
and right now, the United States is pushing away from the international criminal, the ICC and the ICJ, because they're not legitimate organizations. They're anti-Semitic organizations, and therefore I'm not going to legitimize them, and I'm completely not going to accept your idea that I have to take everything whole cloth. That's not the way the world works. Okay, I don't have to take everything whole cloth. There are elements in what the so-called international community is doing which are illegitimate, and I will not accept them. Okay, I will not accept them. I don't have to accept everything that the ICJ or ICC says. I will not, because I think that they are anti-Semitic bodies, and I think that they're not legitimate. And I have to defend myself, not to defend international law. I said that there are some elements of international law.
But then later say, well, actually, I do not have to recognize it.
I'll say it right now, and I've said it. I'm saying it as clearly as possible. When things are right, I'll recognize them, and when they're wrong, I'm going to call that out. And if you want me to be some kind of slave to some kind of automaton to anti-Semitic and biased and agents of Iran and all that, then I'm not going to do that. And so therefore, it is being fair, and I'm being honest. Certain things from all the way from the 20s were legitimate. The crap that they're saying today is not. If I was Israel, I would leave the United Nations. I would, by the way, notice Taiwan is not in the United Nations. It's fine. Notice that the United States is not part of the ICC, ICJ. It's fine. So I would leave that organization in a heartbeat and say to it, you could just go fly a kite. We don't respect you. You're not a serious, legitimate. You're not a legitimate organization. You're illegitimate, and I will not accept it. I have to survive. How do you pronounce your name? Freza? I'm sorry. We have to survive. and not succumb to the bullying tactics
But you
of the
cannot go
ICC,
and
ICJ.
survive by ethnically cleansing other people.
Yeah, ethnically
This is
cleansing.
not the way
We're
it
real
goes.
ethnic cleansers. We're real ethnic cleansers around here. By the way, why don't you get to concerning what's happening right now in Yemen? 500,000 people dying from starvation,
Sorry.
and all these other places. You know what's happening in Syria. Do me a favor. There's no ethnic cleansing here. That's just
About. You
completely.
cannot come and tell me that it's worse somewhere else when we're talking about your project right now. You're the one that's
And you
promoting
cannot
a
come and
greater
tell me what I cannot
Israel
come and
by
tell you.
wanting to
I will tell you what I
ethnically
think
cleanse
and how I
other
live my life around here. I have to survive. And we're not doing ethnic cleansing, although we should do voluntary immigration. That
voluntary immigration.
Voluntary
No
immigration.
one is. Would you leave your land
Please, we're
voluntarily?
here
The one that you
we're
are
here
so
to
dear.
listen to Yishai.
I'm
Please,
sorry.
please.
I'm sorry.
This is
This
not
nice
a-
lady who's speaking with me, and I appreciate your questions. She is not listening to Arabs. She's speaking for the Arabs, and yet I can play you right now from this computer tens of videos of Arabs saying, just let me out of Gaza and let me go to a different country. I want out. We know that there are tons of Arabs who want out. They don't want to be part of this conflict. They recognize either through the Quran or other ways that Israel is the rightful owner of this land, and they want out. But you would like to keep them there because you would like to be pawns of the jihad. We say, no, let them have their liberty and freedom to go somewhere else.
Did I not put
Okay,
that?
there's people that have been holding on their hands for a long time. Let's let them ask questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Frieza and Yishai. This is a very important conversation, and I really do hope that we'll have a chance to have it in more detail at some point.
Alexander has been holding his hand up physically and digitally for a long time. Let the man speak.
Yes, Alexander, please.
Thank you, Yishai, by the way. Well, first of all, it was very interesting to me to hear an actual settler speak. We hear a lot about the settlers, but so rarely in the media and in academia do we get to hear an actual settler. I wanted to get back to the question that you kind of touched on at the beginning between this tension between nationalism, I guess we mean broadly ethnic nationalism, and democracy. It seems as though part of the reason why Israel has not annexed the land is because of that tension, right? Because you can have an ethnic democracy. In fact, many of the states of Europe, like Hungary, Italy, etc., were formed as ethnic democracies, but only when you have a majority, of that ethnicity. But if Israel were to annex the West Bank, you would potentially have an Arab majority within those frontiers. So this is sort of the classic problem, I think, that is Israel a Western democracy, or is it primarily a nationalist Jewish state? It hasn't had to make that decision. It sounds, and tell me if you think that I'm characterizing your views correctly. It sounds like you're saying ultimately the Jewish nationalism is what's important, even if that means not giving voting rights to millions of Arabs in these territories that you want to annex, that's more important than democracy. Whereas, I mean, it seems like that's a lot of Israel. Yeah. So
but Alexander,
at least I respect your clarity that you're willing to sort of abandon Western democracy in order to preserve Jewish sovereignty.
First thing is the answer. The direct answer to the question is yes. I favor Jewish nationalism over democracy. I think I said that clearly before, without mincing words. At the same time, both as a Jew and as a Western person as well, to some extent, going to American law school, etc., I have a love and a respect for democratic principles. In fact, there are some democratic principles which Israel would be wise to take upon itself. For example, Israel doesn't have a poison fruit doctrine for evidence. So if the police procure evidence in a way that's illegal, it still stands in court. Israel's got a lot to learn about democracy. Okay, it's got a lot to learn about democracy. And I pointed out that even in the American democracy, when it suits it, it denies voting rights to all kinds of people. There are, by the way, 2 million Puerto Ricans. So, but the Puerto Ricans, do they endanger the American country? No, not at all. But for some reason, they're denied full voting rights. with regarding to Judea and Samaria, we have a problem, which you've pointed out. There are, let's say, 2 million Arabs there, maybe more. We have to assert sovereignty, and we have to give certain rights and decencies and demands on the population there. I advocate for a much broader sense of resident alien residency status. Another option that I wrote about in the New York Times is that they would get their citizenship back in Jordan and stay as residents in Israel because they were originally Jordanian citizens. Okay? I do need to remind you, Alexander, that there is literally not one Arab country that has real voting. Not one. So when they actually control their countries, they literally, out of their 22 Arab countries, they don't have one with normal voting. And so therefore, voting is not exactly a Middle Eastern concept. It's a Western concept, which is nice. It's beautiful, but it's not the ultimate value. It's not the ultimate value here in the Middle East. In order to ensure the safety of my nationalist protectorate and reservation, called Israel, which is a tiny Jewish state in this region, I have to take steps that are not fully democratic and are more concerned with my nationality as opposed to concern for equality for all. This is not a state or a region of equality for all. Not to mention, Alexander, remember that Jews have no equality whatsoever in the Arab states next door, right? We have none of that. And let me ask you this. Do you think that those people that came out of Auschwitz were like, we've got to create a Jewish state and also be the only state that gives democratic rights to Arabs to say everything that they want to undermine us and destroy us? Of course not. People didn't come out of the Holocaust in order to create the only voting system for Arabs in this whole region. God bless the Arabs. God bless them. They have 22 countries today. They have a lot of wealth. Allah loves them. I always tell them that. Allah loves you. Okay, but this small plot of land is ours. Want to live here. Here's residency or Jordanian citizenship. Here are some options for you, or maybe find your home somewhere else. But we've got to defend our peoplehood, okay? We got to defend our peoplehood. And look at the other option. Look at the other option. The other option, the logical option is, okay, take a chunk of land, cut it out, and give it to them. That's what we did in Gaza. And how did that work out? Brainwashing, jihadism, suppression. Did they get any voting rights over there? Please, come on. They voted in Hamas, and then immediately they destroyed all of their rights. We are the real liberal country in this region. And an Arab resident of Israel will have more rights, more democratic rights than anything in Arab countries like Syria or Egypt. By the way, I also don't reject the idea that there'll be some kind of limited voting. For example, let's say we'll cap it. We'll say there's 5 Arab Knesset members, no matter what the population of Arabs are, so that they could have some kind of representation. Or like the Puerto Rico model, that they'll have non-voting representatives. They'll be able to air out their concerns. There are ways around it. But really, let's look at the big picture. These things are technicalities, important ones, but the technicalities still. The real issue is the Jewish state's got to survive in this tough region. We're surrounded not by liberal progressives wanting a state, but by jihadists who use the liberal language to undermine the state of Israel. We can't allow that. We can't allow that. We have to survive. Friends, I want to tell you, I am very excited to be part of the Zionist project. There are definitely challenges. The question of rights for non-Jews is a big question. Question of our borders is another question. Question of the nature of the Jewish state. How much is religion going to play a factor? How much not? These are big questions. But I'm very excited about it, and I'm very positive. With all of our challenges, we believe that this is the greatest time in Jewish history. The greatest time in Jewish history. This is the time of our rebirth. And yes, we have a lot of challenges, but it's an amazing time. Our children are growing up in this land, speaking the Hebrew language, studying the Bible, making it in a strong economy and strong army. It's an honor and a pleasure to be part of it. And it is a providential time. And for me, I think that every moment to be part of this thing is a gift, and we have to do our maximum to make this state thrive. Moreover, this region thrives with Israel. I think that the Abraham Accords is the beginning of the most beautiful and normalizing movement in this region. And I'll give you a very short vision for peace. What does peace look like? It's simple. Peace looks like a strong Jewish state surrounded by strong Arab states, living together in the Abrahamic region and making it a better future for our children with tourism, technology, hospitals, heritage, spirituality, and beauty. And that's the future of this region, the Abrahamic region, which is my new name instead of Middle East. I call it the Abrahamic region. That's the future, and I'm very excited to be part of it. I want to thank you very much for also letting me be together with you. Gabriel, thanks for inviting me. I have to go on to do many other things today, so I want to thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, I thank you also very much, Yishai, for speaking to us and for being so honest, because that's something that's really missing in today's conversation. People don't want to tell the truth. They want to pose as something that they're not. And to have somebody who actually tells us what they believe and presents it in a positive way, I think is fantastic. And let's all thank Yishai Fleischer. This has been a very excellent beginning of a conversation that can go into many different directions, and I hope we'll have an opportunity for that in the future. Thank you very much, Yishai, and thank you very much, and
thank you to all the good questions and all the good folks, the smart folks that are here. It's wonderful to be with you. Have a good night, and God bless you. Toda.
All the best.